I'm 44 years old, and I'm currently navigating a complicated, painful divorce. After 20 years of marriage, I found out my husband, David, 45, had been cheating on me with his secretary, Jessica, 35, for almost a year. He finally confessed a couple of months ago, and I wasted no time filing for divorce and moving out of our family home. Since then, I've been staying with a friend while trying to make sense of everything that's happened. I have an 18-year-old daughter, Sophie, who was supposed to start college this fall. I thought I'd be there for her every step of the way, helping her pack, offering advice, being a shoulder to lean on. Instead, I feel like I'm losing her too. When David came clean about the affair, I thought Sophie would be on my side. I thought she'd be devastated too, but she wasn't. In fact, she seemed oddly indifferent. Sophie was a senior in high school at the time, and she had been spending more and more time with David. I noticed she'd started growing closer to him than to me over the past few years, but I assumed it was just a phase. She was still my little girl in my eyes, and I believed she loved us both equally. But when I left David, I was shocked at how Sophie reacted. She didn't call me, she didn't text to ask where I was or how I was doing. She didn't seem to care about the devastation I was feeling. It took nearly a week for me to reach out to her. I texted her to let her know what had happened, and she replied that she already knew. She didn't seem bothered by it at all. She said it wasn't her problem, and that she just wanted to stay out of it. I was hurt and confused. I never imagined that Sophie wouldn't side with me, but it seemed like she had already picked a side, David's side. It didn't make sense to me. He had been the one to betray our family, yet Sophie was acting like nothing had happened. She'd grown so close to Jessica, the woman who had been the reason for the breakdown of our marriage, that it felt like Sophie was accepting her as a second mother. I tried to talk to her. I made several attempts to set up meetings to talk things through, but Sophie was distant. She barely responded to my texts, and when we did meet up, she seemed uninterested. She was glued to her phone, barely making eye contact with me. The few times I tried to make a day out of it, it felt like I was forcing her to be there. The breaking point came when I saw a post on Sophie's Instagram. She was hugging Jessica, calling her mom, in the caption with a heart emoji. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. I couldn't believe my daughter was calling the woman who had caused our family's destruction mom. I couldn't fathom how Sophie could do this to me. I snapped. I called her, and when she didn't answer, I called her again. And again. I lost track of how many times I called, but I was beyond caring at that point. I was furious, heartbroken, and desperate for answers. When she finally picked up, she sounded annoyed, like she couldn't believe I was bothering her. I demanded to know why she'd posted that, why she was calling Jessica her mother. Sophie got defensive. She told me I had no right to get upset about it, and that I was stalking her social media. I reminded her that I was her mother, and it wasn't like I was spying on a private account. It was a public post, and as her mom, I had every right to see what she shared. But Sophie didn't care about my feelings. She told me I needed to get over it, that it wasn't a big deal, and that I was just being petty. She said she didn't owe me anything and that I should focus on making my future better, like she was trying to do with her new family. She even threatened to block me if I kept acting this way. That was the last straw for me. I couldn't believe Sophie would be so callous, so dismissive of everything I had done for her. I didn't want to cry anymore. I didn't want to feel like I was the only one who cared. If Sophie didn't need me, then I didn't need her either. So I did something drastic. Something I'm still not sure was the right decision, but I did it anyway. Sophie and I had set aside money for her college fund, half of which David had agreed to cover and half that I had saved. It was supposed to be for her future, for her education, but instead I used it for something else. I had been eyeing this beautiful house for a while, something I knew I couldn't afford while still living in the family home. But now that I was free, now that I didn't have to worry about David's objections or Sophie's reluctance to leave, I decided I would buy it. I contacted the real estate agent, and I offered up the entire college fund plus a little more to secure the house. It was a huge step for me. I thought it would help me feel in control of my life again, like I was taking back some power. Maybe I wasn't going to get my daughter's support, but I would have this house, something that was all mine. A few days later, I posted a picture of the house on my social media. I wanted to show everyone that I wasn't just sitting at home crying, wallowing in the pain of my divorce. I was moving on, I was building a new life, and I was doing it on my own. David texted me shortly after, furious. He asked how I had managed to afford the house, since we both knew it was out of my budget. I told him the truth. I'd spent Sophie's college fund. I wasn't sorry about it. Not anymore. He flipped out, accusing me of being a bad mother, of being petty and vengeful. He said I had no right to do this to Sophie. But the thing was, Sophie didn't need me anymore. She didn't need my money. She had chosen her father and his new life with Jessica. If she didn't care about me, then why should I keep sacrificing for her? I ended the conversation with David, but the next chapter was still ahead of me, Sophie. I knew I had just crossed a line. I knew I might never be able to fix things with her, but I couldn't just let it slide. Sophie's indifference to my pain, her betrayal of our family, had hurt me more than anything else. And now I was the one who had to live with the consequences. I never thought it would come to this. I always imagined that if things fell apart with Jonathan, I'd be the one who got to pick up the pieces. I thought I'd be the one she'd turn to when everything went south. After all, I was the one who raised Mia. I'm the one who was there for her every step of the way. Through the school plays, the late-night talks, the fights, and the hugs. But when it came time for her to pick a side in this divorce, she chose him. She chose Jonathan. She chose Alicia. And that cut me deeper than anything else. It started right after Jonathan finally admitted to the affair. I remember the day clearly. I had walked into our living room, expecting to have a normal day, and instead Jonathan told me he'd been seeing Alicia for almost a year. He confessed with this weird mix of guilt and relief in his eyes, like he had been waiting for me to figure it out, but it didn't make it any easier. It shattered me, and I thought at the very least Mia would be on my side. She'd see how badly her father hurt me, and she'd stick with me, just like she always had. But no. She didn't text me. She didn't check in. In fact, it was like she just vanished. And when I finally reached out to her a week later, her response was cold, almost dismissive. She said she didn't care about the affair, that it didn't concern her. I was stunned. I thought she didn't even fully know what was going on, but she did. And yet she didn't care. I couldn't wrap my head around it. At first, I tried to brush it off, telling myself maybe she was just in shock. After all, her world was changing fast. But then I started seeing the signs. She wasn't just distancing herself from me. She was getting closer to Alicia. I saw it on social media first. A photo of her hugging Alicia with a caption that read, "This is my mom, Redheart." I froze when I saw that. I wanted to scream. I wanted to call her and demand an explanation. But what good would that do? I was already spiraling, feeling like I had no control over anything anymore. The marriage, the house, the life I had built. It was all slipping through my fingers. And now my daughter? She was slipping away too. I tried to reach out to Mia again, but she wouldn't answer. She wasn't even acknowledging my texts. So I did something I now regret. I called her relentlessly about 18 times in one night, until she finally picked up. When she answered, she sounded annoyed. I didn't care. I wanted answers. I needed to know why she was calling Alicia mom. After everything that had happened, Mia's response hit me like a punch to the gut. She said it wasn't my business, that I had no right to question her about it. She didn't think I should be stalking her Instagram, even though she had a public account and I was her mother. The more I pressed her, the more defensive she became. She said she owed me nothing. She said she wasn't going to side with me just because I was the one who got cheated on. The words stung more than I want to admit. Then she blocked me. Just like that. My daughter, who I'd spent years nurturing, teaching, guiding, who I thought would always have my back, blocked me. I was shattered. I cried for an hour after the call ended, feeling completely alone. But after the tears, a cold realization set in. Mia didn't need me. She had her father and Alicia now. And so, I decided to do something for me. We'd always planned to save for Mia's college fund. Jonathan and I had each put aside a chunk of money for her. We agreed that it was something we'd split down the middle, and it was something that would set her up for success when she left for college. But now, after what Mia had done, I felt like she didn't deserve it. I was heartbroken, yes, but I was also furious. Furious at Jonathan for the affair. Furious at Mia for how she treated me. I'd worked hard for that money, but what was the point if she didn't even want me in her life? So I took the college fund and spent it on something I'd been dreaming of for years. A new house. It was a beautiful place in a nice neighborhood. One that I could finally call my own, where I could start fresh, without the ghost of Jonathan and the life we had together hanging over me. The deal was done, and the house was mine. I took a photo of it and posted it online, hoping to send a message that I wasn't going to let this break me. Jonathan saw it, of course. A few days later, he texted me asking how I was able to afford such a house. He knew the college fund was supposed to be for Mia's education. I didn't care what he thought. I told him straight up that I spent the money. I spent it on myself for once, and I had no regrets. He flipped out. Of course he did. He called me irresponsible, petty, and vindictive. He accused me of punishing Mia for not taking my side. He said I was jealous that she was getting along with Alicia. I wasn't jealous. I was hurt, but he didn't understand that. He never did. I told him I was done trying to explain myself to him, and I hung up. I wasn't done though. I still had Mia to deal with. After that call with Jonathan, I thought maybe things would cool down, but they didn't. Mia kept texting me asking about the money. She was upset. She wanted to know why I wasn't going to contribute to her college fund anymore. I ignored her for a few days, but eventually I gave in and texted her back. I told her the money was already gone. I told her that after everything that had happened, she had made her priorities clear. She didn't need me. She didn't need my money. She had Alicia now, and Alicia could help her with her college fund if she felt so strongly about it. Mia texted back, saying it was just a post, just a gesture. She couldn't understand why I was making such a big deal out of it. But to me it wasn't just a post. It was a betrayal. It was her choosing them over me. I said as much. And then, after that long, emotional exchange, I muted her notifications. I couldn't handle it anymore. I thought I was done. I thought Mia and I were done. I was so angry at her, and I couldn't see how things could ever go back to the way they were. But the universe had other plans. Time passed and things just didn't get any better. The house was quiet, almost too quiet. The kind of quiet that wraps around you like a heavy blanket, suffocating every thought. It had been weeks since I last heard from Mia. Weeks since I'd heard her voice or seen her face. And that silence, it hurt more than anything. Because it wasn't just about the money or the betrayal from Jonathan. It was about how my daughter, my flesh and blood, had turned her back on me. I kept busy trying to drown out the pain. I redecorated the house, started a garden in the backyard, and filled my days with work. But every night when the world went dark and quiet, I'd sit alone in my new home, staring at the walls and wondering where it all went wrong. One evening I was standing in the kitchen, chopping vegetables for dinner, when my phone buzzed on the counter. It was a message from Mia. First I froze. I couldn't believe it. I hadn't heard from her in so long. I'd almost convinced myself she was gone for good. I wiped my hands on a towel, grabbed the phone and read her text. "Mom, can we talk?" My heart skipped a beat. Of course I wanted to talk to her. But at the same time I was scared. Scared of what she might say, scared of what I might say. I hadn't prepared myself for this moment, not really. It wasn't as simple as picking up where we left off. Too much had happened. I thought about it for a moment, then typed back. "I'm here." "When?" She responded almost instantly. "Now. If you're free." I took a deep breath. This was it. I sat down on the couch and waited. My hands were shaking, my mind racing, but I didn't want to seem weak. So I forced myself to breathe slowly, trying to calm my nerves. I knew this conversation could either heal the wounds or tear them open even wider. It felt like everything hinged on what Mia was going to say next. The phone rang and I almost dropped it. I took another deep breath and answered. "Mia," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Hi, Mom," she said softly. There was a pause, like she didn't quite know where to start. Then she added, I'm sorry." The words hit me like a rush of cold water. I wasn't expecting that, not at all. I'd spent so much time being angry at her, trying to move on, that I didn't know how to respond to her apology. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "I've been horrible to you," she said. "I wasn't fair. I don't know why I acted that way. I just wanted to protect myself. From you, from everything. But I see now that I hurt you. And I'm sorry for that. I didn't mean to." It wasn't what I had expected, but it was what I had needed to hear. For the first time in months, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe we could rebuild this. Maybe we could fix what had been broken. I I don't know what to say, I whispered back. I've missed you so much, Mia. I've been so angry and I didn't know if you even cared about me anymore. But hearing this, it means more than you know. I care about you, Mom, she said, her voice shaky. I do. I've just been confused. I didn't know how to deal with everything that was happening. I was mad at you too for taking the money, and for not being happy for me when I found a place with Alicia. But that's not your fault. It was my way of coping, and I shouldn't have pushed you away. I took a deep breath, feeling a weight lift from my chest. It wasn't a perfect apology, and it wasn't a perfect fix, but it was a start. A real start. I was hurt too, Mia, I said slowly. I know you're trying to find your place in all this, but so am I. I'm not perfect. I never have been. But I'm your mother. And I love you. And I always will, no matter what. There was a long pause on the other end, and for a moment I wondered if the call had ended. But then I heard Mia's voice again, quieter this time. Can we start over, Mom? Not like it was before, but something better. I don't want to lose you. The tears came without warning. I hadn't realized how much I needed to hear that, how much I needed her to want me, to need me. After everything, after the months of pain and isolation, Mia was reaching out. She was ready to build something new, something better. I'd like that, I said, wiping my eyes. I'd really like that. We talked for another hour, just talking. About how things had been, about how things could be. We both admitted that the road ahead wasn't going to be easy. There were so many things that had to be worked through. So many misunderstandings, so much hurt. But we agreed that we were going to try. And that's all I could ask for. After we hung up, I sat there for a while, holding the phone in my hands, letting the quiet sink in. It felt like the first time in months that I could actually breathe, like maybe there was light at the end of the tunnel. But even with this glimmer of hope, I knew things wouldn't be simple. Mia was still in her world with Alicia and Jonathan, and I had to accept that. I wasn't going to be the only mother in her life anymore. But I could be a mother. I could be there in whatever way Mia needed. Slowly, step by step, we'd rebuild the bridge that had burned between us. As I sat there, I realized something important. Sometimes, healing doesn't come all at once. Sometimes it's messy and it's slow. But that's okay. Because as long as you're willing to try, there's always a chance for something new to grow. Days passed and we kept in touch, but it wasn't like things magically fixed themselves. Mia was still figuring out where she stood, and I was still learning how to let go of the anger. Every conversation felt like a fragile thread, just hanging there between us, connecting us but barely holding. I could sense the distance, the walls that were still there, and I wondered if we could ever truly get past them. But we tried. One Saturday, Mia asked me if I wanted to meet up. She wanted to see me in person. I was nervous, terrified actually. I hadn't seen her face to face in months, and I didn't know what to expect. But I agreed. Maybe this was the step we needed, the one that would bring us closer, or maybe it would just show us how far apart we still were. We agreed to meet at a small cafe in town, the kind of place where time seemed to slow down. When I arrived, I saw Mia sitting at a table near the window. She looked older somehow, more grown up, but there was still that softness in her eyes, that little girl I used to know. I stood there for a moment just watching her, trying to figure out if she was still my daughter, the one I'd held in my arms all those years ago. When she saw me, she stood up, and I saw the hesitation in her steps. We both stood there for a moment, unsure of what to do next. Then without a word we walked toward each other and hugged. It wasn't a perfect hug, not by any means, but it was enough. It was a beginning. I've missed you, Mom, she said, her voice thick with emotion. I've missed you too, I whispered back, feeling the tears start to rise again. We sat down, and for the first time in a long while, the silence between us didn't feel heavy. It felt natural, like we were finding our way back to something that had always been there. We ordered coffee, and Mia told me about her life, about Alicia, her job, the small things she was learning, and the bigger things she was struggling with. She was still trying to figure out who she was, but there was something different in her voice. It was as if she was starting to see the world more clearly, and with that clarity she was starting to see me too. As we talked, I realized something important. Mia hadn't just been pushing me away. She'd been lost, confused, trying to make sense of her own life. And I had been so focused on my own pain that I couldn't see that. It wasn't about me not being there for her. It was about her not knowing how to ask for help, how to lean on anyone. She was scared just like I was. "Mom," she said after a while, looking at me with a mixture of hope and uncertainty. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course," I said, feeling my heart skip a beat. I know things haven't been easy, but do you think we could, I don't know, maybe start over? Not like we were before, but maybe we could try being family again? Slowly, if you're okay with that." I looked at her, and in that moment I understood. I understood the weight of what she was asking. And I realized this was the moment I had been waiting for. Not to fix everything at once, not to erase the past, but to take the first step toward healing, toward something real. "I think we can," I said, my voice steady. "We don't have to be perfect. We just have to try." She smiled, and it was the first genuine smile I'd seen from her in so long. It wasn't the kind of smile that came from avoiding the hard stuff. It was the kind that comes from knowing that, even if the road ahead is uncertain, you're not walking it alone. That afternoon, as we left the cafe, I felt something in me shift. It was like I had carried this heavy stone for so long, not knowing how to put it down, and suddenly I was able to let go of it just for a moment. Maybe things wouldn't always be easy, maybe the distance wouldn't always disappear, but we had a chance now. We had time. And that's all I needed, to know that we were on the same path again, even if it was just one step at a time. As I walked to my car, I realized something else too. I had been so focused on the idea of what Mia should be, the daughter I thought she was supposed to be, that I hadn't seen her for who she really was. She wasn't perfect. She never had been. And neither was I. But maybe, just maybe, we could find something better than perfection. I wasn't sure what the future held for us, but I knew that, for the first time in a long time, it felt like it could be something worth holding on to.